This is our last session on testing the true, looking at the true image, and we get to a point where you begin to realize that as the availability of affection and the availability of discipline is all declining because you worked at it early and you had to discipline less, they're secure in their affections. Your family has grown in godliness. You've concentrated on the gospel's effect in your family, not your church's effect in your family. But you get your daughter, your firstborn, if it's a daughter, it turns 13, and the world comes to an end. Emotions run wild, hormones ankle deep in the home. And you realize that things are happening that weren't part of the earlier description. We know a lot of young people who were the faithful daughters of, sons and daughters of things of the church, whatever church they were in. And they hit their teenage years and something went sideways. Now, we sort of got to know, like in all these stages, what are we shooting for? We're generally exchanging maturity. We want them to go from the custodial control of you as an old covenant with you into a new covenant of their own Christianity and their own stability as a human being. You want them to think of you as good, not think of you as religious. And so we got to know what the target goals are. And at the end, there's some biblical descriptions of success, raising children. And they are in Timothy and Titus. The saying is sure, if anyone aspires to the office of bishop, he desires a noble task. Now, a bishop must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, sensible, dignified, hospitable, an apt teacher, no drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, and no lover of money. He must manage his own household well, keeping his children submissive and respectful in every way. For if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how can he care for God's church? It also suggests for deacons that they also let them manage their children and their households well. Titus adds, and his children are believers and not open to the charge of being profligate or insubordinate. So you got a nice list there. What are they? They're submissive, respectful, and in every way. So it's not merely they did something submissive one time in 2024 and that was it. In every way. And that they be believers, not profligate, and not insubordinate. So you got 3 positives, 2 negatives. So that's your target goal. You say, well, I thought that was for bishop. Well, come on, folks. You say, well, I'm shooting for something less than this. A little profligacy, a little insubordination. No, this is a great list, and it says, 1, with good management of your home, it's possible, because it's measuring the bishop's management. I know people who are dear Christians who don't have these kind of kids. I don't think Christianity and even being a very sincere Christian produces this. Management of the home produces this. That's why you allow him to be bishop. It proved he knows how to manage these things. One membership for another. The membership of the family he managed well, and his people were believers, respectful, submissive, not wicked, and not insubordinate. Now, that is something that a lot of, most of American church, enough that we mentioned that in the last session or the session before, of how pastors' kids and missionary kids are just the worst, because everybody ignores this qualification. Matter of fact, probably a lot of the qualifications. They want an apt teacher, so preferably with a British accent. That'd be it. If he were a good evangelical doctrinally and he had an English accent, what could you ask for more in a pastor? But you got things like dignified, temperate, hospitable, not a drunkard, not quarrelsome. But this is about child rearing, and it says this is the proving ground, probably the biggest proving ground that you can point at with the man who wants to be a bishop and say, you're not qualified. My father wrote a tract years ago called The Neglected Qualification on this verse, these verses, and how many people argued against St. Paul in regard to it. All sorts of ways around it. Well, you know, when they're little kids that are just hellions, the pastor guy says, well, we're not done. You know, it's a work in progress. We're bringing them to a further walk with Christ. And then they end up 18 and on heroin. And, well, they're their own people now. You know, they really, it's either they're too young to be disqualifying, and they're too old to be disqualifying. You better catch me at just that right moment where I'm still to blame and they're already on heroin. Now, it's when you look at the qualifications, you say, that's a pretty light task. Respectful, submissive, and believing, and not riotous in their living, and not insubordinate. I mean, you're not even talking about they're leading Bible studies or they're in Christian work themselves. You're not asking for that. You're not looking at a dynasty of pastoral giftedness. You're looking at a truly regenerate person. That's all we ask. Now, my parents were told, because there was 4 of us in the family, my sister and 2 brothers, myself, and one of the benefits of it, growing up close, growing up in the ministry, growing up in close proximity, and watching all of the kids of all of my siblings growing up and then getting married and then producing grandkids and great-grandkids, that we're seeing this repeated again and again. We don't have unbelieving, now some of them are still very much, Beverly's, we don't know how she's going to turn out, but she's going to be a problem. This path of my parents were bothered by people when we were young, and we knew our own sins. It's not that we didn't sin. We didn't sin rebelliously. We did not disbelieve. We didn't, even when I was not a Christian, I believed, I just didn't want to submit. But the idea was the Wilsons were just given placid children. Temperamentally, our Myers-Briggs, whatever it was, worked out for us, and we were just kind of laid back, and we weren't tempting parents or challenging parents like other kids who just inherited a different gene code. Now, if you have the view that if people are lucky enough to get placid children, they could meet this qualification, then there's no benefit in good management of the home at all, because you just got to count on the luck, whether or not you got issued those kids. And then you would have to say that the qualification means that if someone is lucky in their kids, we can count on them being lucky in the church, because they said it was management. What they meant was luck. And if they could manage the household of God, it will have to be lucky too, because it wasn't any of their skill. It was just, their kids were brain dead. Now, if you look at the qualifications, and again, these are, I'm saying this is a list of end result standards for your family and your kids. The reason I say that is not that respectful and submission can't occur very early, but you have to get to a certain place, whatever you think of it as, where the child is alert enough to their circumstance to believe unto salvation. So whatever age that is, some say, it could be as young as 5 or something like that. Others could say, like Jesus, 12 years old. The last two are adult sinners. Profligacy is lying on your face drunk outside of John's Alley. That's what you're doing. You're profligate. That means you've taken on the ways of the world and the ways of the sinful world in behavior. And it's got to be an adult child. And my father always had the opinion that he would leave the ministry at any point in his life, if at any point in my life or Doug's life or anybody's life, we violated the standard. Because one, he thought, even if he wasn't putting things into our life as directly as when he raised us, he would suspect he had done something that prepped us for this kind of rebellion later on. Or at least he was obligated to view us as his greatest ministry rather than staying in the ministry. To stay in the ministry that he couldn't manage because he hadn't successfully reached out to his own child to get us to return to Christ. So that, a person might have different views about whether that's just overly noble or just something that at least measures Jim Wilson's seriousness about it all. And we're looking at this as a measure, a dipstick going into your kid as to what you didn't arrive at. If they were not submissive, maybe didn't discipline justly or wisely. They're not respectful. Parent was not a clear adult in relation to the clear child. They're not believers. Parents were either not substantively changed by Jesus Christ and made up for it by personal hypocrisy and fraudulent religion, or they walked with Christ but without wisdom and authority. So you basically have, with those three things, you have something that three of our talks covered. We were talking about whether your Christianity is exactly what the doctor ordered in Christ, not what the religion ordered in the 2,000 years of tradition. Discipline, and adulthood. That respectful has to do with adulthood, submission has to do with discipline, and belief has to do with your Christianity. Now, the last two, profligate and insubordinate, besides representing at least early adults, if not later, we sometimes think that we are reaching it when we've reached the pretense of a squared-away child who has not reached a certain age. Now, why is it a certain age? It's not just the artificial time point. We say adolescence is over here, and you're now an adult, where certain record-keeping checks it off the list and says, yep, you're qualified, or you've been successful as a parent, all your children are believers, all of them stayed away from a life of sin. What happens regarding this kind of moment? Now, you probably remember puberty. And those memories were not good. I was a dork. I was a dork that really wanted to be not a dork. And I was a dork that really wanted to be not a dork because there were girls. And it was just a messed up time. The only thing that saved me was long hair. And that, pulled me out of my vortex of despondency and got me some standing socially. But as you look at the nature of the world, it says in 1 John, do not love the world or the things in the world. The things of the world are plain, the desire of the eyes, desire of the flesh, and the pride of life. It's all that is in the world. And so I take John at his word and go, okay, I'll use that little, what do you call them, trilogy of things. Say, yeah, this is what he at least generally thought covered the basis for everything we do, both good and bad. And when you realize what happens to your children, all three of those things come home to them unique from their home experience. Okay? You might have had them memorize that verse in 1 John, back when they were 7. They don't know what we call these the new lords. They become aware of desire that isn't as functional of just basic little sinful selfishness that little kids have, or meanness of spirit or something. Adults are being called to by the new lords, and the new lords, I would say, are society, which is pride of life, sexuality, which is the flesh, and beauty, which is the eyes. Now, all these things were made by God. That we have these desires. Eve had these desires before she sinned. When she sinned, when the snake chatted it up with her and removed in her mind the obstacle of death for certain, she then fell back on her desires, which were, it was a delight to the eyes, it was desired for food, and it was desired to make one wise. So she had all three: beauty, appetite, and standing. And then and the serpent had removed the consequence, which said, you will not surely die, because you'll become like the gods, knowing good and evil. So we know that this is a present set of desires in the nature of the creation. That we're, in 1 John, it tells us to not love those things. It says, do not love the world or the things in the world, for the things of the world are plain. It's not saying the things in the world are evil. The things of the world may not and should not be loved, because they have a role, they have a responsibility. We're all married, right? There's no single people here. You've all gotten married because of the lust of the flesh. Let's just be frank, okay? You all have jobs because of the pride of life. You all are, I have pictures. Singer Sergeant, N.C. Wyeth, who's a Frederick Church. And I like art. I like beauty. I like being surrounded by beauty. So we are very much having these things be a part of our lives. Because of the temptation to sin, let each man have his own wife and each woman her own husband. Oh. Okay, that's God's answer to the desire of the flesh. That you follow the desire of the flesh to where God asks you to follow it. What part it takes. Where is it ordinately in your arrangement of life? Now, a teenager gets these things thrown into their hopper. Suddenly, they've got friends that aren't from church. Even some of the ones from church are a little worldlier than you want them to be around. I got a phone call just last week from out of the area where I had to repeat this information. Thankfully, it was on my mind. That they were trying to restrain a daughter who had just hit 13 from having friendships with bad girls, girls of not good family. And I had to go, what are you doing? There's something wrong here. Remember, if you try to lock down with more disciplined government at the end of the job, you're just saying you were wrong, you made a mistake, you're trying to make up for it at the last minute by crushing the will of your child, or moving to Wook, Iowa, so you can be away from, off-grid and not see any porn on the computer, and not see any movies over PG, and not get any magazines, whatever it takes. You got to get away from all that. Now, what we're recommending, when we're talking society and the pride of life, you're looking at where you are standing in your social group. That's what your existence as a self is always measuring. You're talking about, argued about that this morning at Drones, the extension of your will. Why men love machines is because it extends our will. We could see the extension, the gearing, the levering of the backhoe. Nothing could be better for any man here but to have a backhoe. and be out in the yard till late at night, just digging trenches because you can, because your will can move tons of earth very rapidly. Now, we're simple creatures. Feed us, smile at us occasionally. But we're wanting to extend our will, and when we find out, and society is the special area where it's not merely to ourselves we've extended our will, but we are measured among our fellow men, our peer group, as being all that. I really wanted to be cool. It really, really matters to a teenager. And they don't know how to define it. You hear it for the first time from your child who doesn't know how to define it. And you don't know what cool is. And you forgot what cool is. And you wondered, I was never cool, you say to yourself. And then you begin to have views against cool. You shouldn't try to be cool. And my advice to you is be as cool as you can be. Now, the reason I have that advice is because what we're suggesting to you. Now, this might be the strongest negative reaction to what we have to say, and we're sorry. But in each of these three areas, society, sex, and beauty, you should be stronger than what the world offers. The world is offering to an immature mind immature advice from immature others about social belonging. And the parents run away. If you run away, if your answer to the problems of the world is retreat, you lost the battle. That's basically all you've said. Lost the battle. Because in each of these things, if they were made by God, if you know there's a right application of them, the demonstration, I have it in the margin here, think of being stronger with and superior in society. That people think of you, your children think of you, as far more socially adroit than anybody they met at junior high. Anybody they see on any TV show that is trying to represent, the young people is always cool or the parents are always deadwood. So think of these three terms as, in each of them, my task is to enjoy and in peace represent you as parents as being better at it than your children are, than the friends of your children are, and they will start, your ministry to the friends of your children will increase. Instead of your being afraid about the friends of your children that they would minister to your children great wickedness, you're demonstrating that time socially in your home, in your life, at your table, is one filled with great conversation, great understanding, pursuit of ideas that they had never thought of before, with charm and wit. And suddenly you realize this is not society that they are familiar with. They're just going to an awful party at a friend's house with, some red light blinking and rap music playing from the hood, and girls trying to make out with guys they just met. Or actually guys trying to make out with girls they just met. Now, what an awful situation. What an awful situation for us adults. We know that'd be an awful society to be in. They don't know it. They just know, it's exciting. And I'm supposed to like this music, and I'm supposed to like these people, and I'm supposed to follow their lead. And so what are you going to do if you treat it as if it's the victorious general of the invading army? It's going to be the victorious general of the invading army. Pretty soon your sons will be wearing basketball jams and talking weird. Now, and nothing could be further from cool. Now, I think I make a point here somewhere in this list. The cool is knowing. The perception of knowing or knowing. Any group, any standard, you're cool in that group or standard if you're knowing. You could be in a group of dorks all about Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, and the guy who knows the most has the plans of the ship memorized. He's going to be the cool one in that group. He's not cool anywhere else, but he's cool in that group. And people why was James Dean cool? because he looked like he knew something. It was that rebel without a cause sort of, yeah, the world is a dark place. What's the point? Dangling a cigarette from his lip. And people said, he must know, because I'm just a straight-laced kid from Midwest, and what can I think that is really unique and questions the reality of all? He's questioning the reality of all. We think that people who are stupid and live stupid lives know more because we live boring lives. And they're acting as if they're Jack Kerouac. Well, Jack Kerouac was acting as if he knew things. So if you have this challenge put up to you, they're making their appeal to the self of the child, offering it leadership in these new real desires that they are not mature enough to take on. If the society doesn't grab hold of them, this is what I mentioned about in our life. My parents did this. We did this with our children. We adjusted our life to being social. We had 400 people live with us, more than 400 now. And people coming over all the time. You guys come over. And we'd have banquets, and we'd have parties, and we would encourage our kids to have their friends home, especially their non-Christian friends, people you meet at the skate park, druggies, whatever.
Have their class parties here.
Have their class parties here, so that everybody wants to be at the Wilsons. You know, some of you, at least Joey was here, back in the day. And then in that circumstance, we would ask our kids when we had time with our children, so-and-so, this kid, what's going on with him? Where is he spiritually? And you basically are telling your kids, all that we're giving to your friends, and we are interested in ministering to your friends and having you involved with the ministry to your friends. And pretty soon, instead of being co-opted by the new social group that they begin to see as not adequate socially, because it really doesn't match the banquets. I grew up in that kind of house. My parents would have midshipmen over all the time from the Naval Academy, and we were just thrilled. Young guys in our teens with midshipmen around, and the midshipmen would take us out to the yard, and we'd throw the ball back, and this is back in the days of Roger Staubach. I don't know that if he ever threw me the football. I don't know, but it could have happened.
The question is, did you catch it?
I probably dropped it because I was not sportsing. But nonetheless, my parents had people, and my mother wasn't that great a cook, but they were open to people and wanted people in their home. And in their home, they wanted us to consider what kind of ministry aid we would be. We were being honored by that inclusion in a more mature, but not just our parents' age set. That could be a hard sell if it was just my parents' age set, but not people who were just 7 years older than we were and in college. We wanted to live up to those things. And our kids had opportunities, and they had started to analyze their friends' spiritual lives. They would go over to their friends' houses sometimes and come back with reports of, yikes, what kind of thing do they live in? What kind of circumstance? What kind of parenting? What kind of... And so they became talkative with us about the state of our society's ministry to others and the other society's attempt on them. And it became very clear that the other society had not much to offer. So you protected them by advancing against the enemy. If you see it as an enemy, you advance on it and you take onto yourself the strengths that will be necessary. You're better at society than they are. And you'd have to be not just saying it to yourself, I'm better at society than they are. You can't just be playing cribbage. I don't mean to insult anybody who plays cribbage. But if that's all you do, don't just have cribbage night at the house. There are other games. There are other... Twister, I think, is the kids seem to like it. Which leads us to the next topic, sex. In the same way as the society, you think of being stronger and superior in the sex. So that's a little too much information, Evan. We don't share those things with our kids. Well, one thing you can do, or a couple things you can do. One, you get to that point where they supposedly have the talk, and there's either the scientific directness, which sex seems a lot more interesting than a scientific talk to your kids. Or you will wander through it with euphemisms that are just showing that you're more embarrassed by this than they are. And you're all embarrassed because a lot of times the kids think, I don't need to talk. I've seen TV. But you want to have that talk, but you don't really know the path by which you would be stronger in this than they. Now, part of it is the way you live your life with your spouse. Not because you're walking around in your skivvies. Well, we're free spirits around here. No, it's not that sort of thing. You don't want to sexualize the home. Nor do you want to make it scientific or just euphemistically silly. But there's a height to sexuality that they don't understand, that you can speak in terms of, that you can register with its sublime meaning. I think this has to do, said St. Paul, with Christ and the church. And that where you spend the time biblically going through the Song of Solomon. Why wouldn't you? It's in the Bible. Your kids will first be embarrassed by it, but if you don't step into the sciencey stuff or think of it as an allegory, because every Christian seems to want to do that, it's really about Christ and the church. It's about knocking boots, and pretty straightforward knocking boots in a polygamous relationship. And soon as you realize that your father or mother knows what that word means, that Solomon had 60 queens that welcome the new girl in the middle of the Song of Solomon. So they're already wives of Solomon. And she's hot under the collar. And there is something biblically grand about it, where you don't debase it with science, and you don't debase it with avoidance, avoidance language. Now, those you need to know the material. In each of these, you need to know the material better than the people who are trying to lead your kids astray. Because the profligacy and the insubordination is because they're up yours, old man. We don't need your silly Puritan ethic about sexuality. We know everything is what we want it to be. And you've got to demonstrate that you know better than those. And you might come up with different ideas. The idea I promote here, besides being the height of sex, the humor of sex. Now, this is something that sex is really comedy. I mean, it's really hilarious. As Lewis says, that Aphrodite is a laughter-loving goddess. And I wanted to read, have the quote by Harry Blamers here in the middle of the page. Who are these people who would at once deny us the rich flavor of romantic love and the hearty salt of the body? Harry Blamers was one of Lewis's students, and he wrote the book, The Christian Mind, which I recommend to you. It's on how Christians think and should think. And he's arguing for this height of the romantic qualities of Venus and the bawdiness of Eros, or maybe I have those backwards. Whatever the case. The humor, the comedy, and I put in the back here on the last page more text than you want to have me read to you, but I'm going to read you some of it. A long quote. This is out of Lewis's Four Loves on his chapter on Eros. And the parts that are bolded, I found to be, at least the ones that were most important to note. The real spiritual danger in Eros as a whole lies, I believe, elsewhere. I will return to the point. For the moment, I want to speak of the danger which, at present, in my opinion, especially haunts the act of love. This is a subject on which I disagree, not with the human race, far from it, but with many of its gravest spokesmen. I believe we are all being encouraged to take Venus too seriously, at any rate, with the wrong kind of seriousness. All my life, a ludicrous and portentous solemnization of sex has been going on. One author tells us that Venus should recur throughout the married life in, quote, a solemn sacramental rhythm. An end quote. A young man to whom I had described as pornographic a novel that he much admired replied with genuine bewilderment, pornographic? But how can it be? It treats the whole thing so seriously. As if a long face were sort of a moral disinfectant. Our friends who harbor the dark gods, the pillar of blood school, attempt seriously to restore something like the phallic religion. Our advertisements, at their sexiest, paint the whole business in terms of the rapt, the intense, the swoony devout, seldom a hint of gaiety. And the psychologists have so bedeviled us with the infinite importance of complete sexual adjustment and the all but impossibility of achieving it, that I could believe that some young couples now go to it with the complete works of Freud, Krafft-Ebing, and Havelock Ellis or Dr. Stopes spread out on bed tables all around them. Cheery old Ovid, who never either ignored a molehill nor made a mountain of it, would be more to the point. We have reached the stage at which nothing is more needed than a roar of old-fashioned laughter. But, it will be replied, the thing is serious. Yes, quadruply so. First, theologically, because this is the body's share in marriage, which, by God's choice, is the mystical image of the union between God and man. Secondly, as what I would venture to call a sub-Christian or pagan or natural sacrament, our human participation in an exposition of the natural forces of life and fertility, the marriage of Sky Father and Earth Mother. Thirdly, on the moral level, in view of the obligations involved in the incalculable momentousness of being a parent and ancestor. Finally, it has, sometimes, not always, a great emotional seriousness in the minds of the participants. But eating is also serious. Theologically, as the vehicle of the Blessed Sacrament. Ethically, in view of our duty to feed the hungry. Socially, because the table is from time immemorial the place for talk. Medically, as all dyspeptics know. Yet we do not bring blue books to dinner nor behave there as if we were in church. It is gourmets, not saints, who come nearest to doing so. Animals are always serious about food. We must not be totally serious about Venus. Indeed, we can't be totally serious about doing violence to our humanity. It is not for nothing that every language and literature in the world is full of jokes about sex. Many of them may be dull or disgusting, and nearly all of them are old. But we must insist that they embody an attitude to Venus which in the long run endangers the Christian life far less than a reverential gravity. We must not attempt to find an absolute in the flesh. Banish play and laughter from the bed of love, and you may let in a false goddess. She will be even falser than the Aphrodite of the Greeks, for they, while they worshipped her, knew that she was laughter-loving. The mass of the people are perfectly right in their conviction that Venus is a partly comic spirit. We are under no obligation at all to sing all of our love duets in the throbbing, world without end, heartbreaking manner of Tristan and Isolde. Let us often sing like Papageno and Papagena instead. Now, it's a great resource. He calls this an infinite joke that God has played on us. And once you realize that you've got this avenue to address all the sexuality in the community, in the world, on the TV, a lot of the things that are really, really funny. And sometimes in family intimacy, you can have that registration of it really being funny. When in Dumb and Dumber, the one guy's trapped on the toilet, and everybody is just dying. My daughter thought I was going to die. because I don't laugh, and I was laughing. Now, we have opportunities to have these moments when something goes by of extreme, you might say, flagrant sexuality in front of you. You know, we'd always tell the story when Gunn was little. Leslie was waiting outside a department store for it to open. Crowd of people there. And there was a very, very, very large black woman in front of them. And when the doors opened and they were streaming in, Gunn is, he's short. And he's looking, and he goes, whoa. And he points. And our general comment has always been when some hottie walks by is, yikes. So that everybody in the family knows what the yikes is about. Because it becomes, instead of being, oh my gosh, temptation, look at the ground, kids, going all Duggar on it, which didn't do them any good when they tried to control those potentials by avoidance. You look at it and you make it funny. You realize the height of it. You realize and not only in Venus is Aphrodite, a laughter-loving goddess. When when Isaac is caught having a little smoochy time with Rebecca in the garden.
Fondling, isn't he?
Fondling. The word's not fondling. The word is laughing with. Now, Abimelech knew what it was laughing about. And he said, what's going on? Your father lied to me this way. He'd gotten used to the Jews lying to him. But they were laughing together. That's the biblical sort of euphemism for what the sexuality meant. So I offer that to you as a path to pursue. Read the whole chapter on Eros. Read the whole book on Eros. That you would get to the point where you could have this, and I recommend it only in family, not in some crisis way, but it's something you can control in family. Where if somebody's a little too body, you can say, don't be talking that way. Recognize the seriousness, the height of this. You got height and you've got comedy, and you've basically taken the explosive nature out of it, with keeping its wonder present. One, because it's the funniness of it and the joke that is being played on us in our rapt pursuit of, when he described advertisements, this is back in the 1950s, and you go, that's the same way advertisements are now. It's all this rapt, swoony, some actor or actress, what's the one for J'adore? What's her name? Charlize Theron, just walking slow-mo with wind blowing up her dress. And you go, yeah, that's sexy, all right, but it's a little dopey, If your wife ever walked down the hall with fans mounted down below, walking in slow motion and doing the, you'd have a good laugh, and she would probably laugh too, and she wouldn't call you Lord.
And then you'd have a good laugh.
Yeah, no, wait a minute, another laugh. So, I make it as a suggestion. These are areas that first you got to say, is this true that this is what they run into? The new lords are offering them things. And they're not all, society, well, the pride of life. Yeah, bad company ruins good morals. And the sex, well, that's always evil because we're Gnostics and we can't allow any kind of concupiscence to absorb. Well, you got to have them ready and wanting to marry for the reason of sex. St. Paul says, don't get married if you don't have the reason of sex. That should be your motivator. But you got to have control, you got to have honor, you got to have, you might say, the comedy of it is very helpful. The last quality is the beauty, which usually happens because every generation has a different set of at least musical idols. And my children are musical. I am not. My wife is musical, so we know where they got it. But two of my older children, Graham for a little bit, were majors in music. Davis in composition, Michael in vocal performance. And And they had all this new music. At the time, it was, Third Eye Blind, and who else was around then?
Collective Soul.
Collective Soul. And,
Pearl Jam.
yeah. Where are they now, I ask you? I think Collective Soul was doing ads for Golden Corral. And I'm serious. They were doing ads, actually talking to you in a Golden Corral. And they must own stock in it or something. And I liked Collective Soul. But what would happen in the kitchen was big arguments about music. Because every generation sees their new X, whatever it is, a type of movie, type of TV show. Parents naturally drop off because they got no interest in that kind of TV show or that kind of movie or that kind of music. Now, it's very obvious that boomers, we've made a name for ourselves by just saying, this is wrong, you don't know what real music is, it's Zeppelin, they're the greatest, and shut up. That's basically the argument. And the kids know they're going to say Zeppelin again. And we had an awful moment where we gave Davis one Christmas 4 CDs of our period music. I think Janis Joplin, the Eagles, Three Dog Night, and something else. We thought, this will educate. Oh, he was so pissed. Now, later on, he repented, and he realizes they're all really good. But at the time, the conflict was between the new lords and the old lords. I was just chanting back, you might say, what my lords in 1968 had told me. And now it was when Davis was, about 2000. Now, this was resolved. We had good arguments, enjoyable arguments. But if the parent seems to be ill-equipped to have anything to say about the new lords are demanding, and it's just a matter of denigrating the previous generation, the family, the parents look like boomer idiots. The okay boomer line is, oh yeah, this is what you guys say. And that is a negative presence in honor your father and mother. Now, how do you step into that, not spend the capital of honor that you got over a few years by holding out for Zeppelin? They are the greatest rock and roll band ever. Okay, but holding out for Zeppelin against all reason or all argument. Now, remember what I said about cool. Cool is knowing. If you try to affirm or deny their world while being moved by anything other than knowing, it becomes uncool. It was just because I liked them when I was young. I still wear the same clothes. This is old man clothes now, but it was what I wore in high school. Levi's, and they were tighter, and I was thinner, and a number of other things. But if I try to step into a beauty conversation without understanding beauty, as soon as it becomes evident to my children that I have spent more philosophy time on beauty than on predilections and taste, well, I like these guys. You like those guys. Well, my generation was better. No, my generation is better. And if you say, no, there are laws of beauty. There's objectivity to the task. Do you have a view of beauty where I was promoting to my children who were music students that they didn't have a view, didn't have a philosophy of what art was and what beauty was and why beauty affected us and how we could judge between them. It's the whole Matt Walsh, what is a woman? People are jumping right in the middle of the argument as if it was a commonly known, we'll just assume this. But no, they have to define it. And in that definition, the argument still went on, but instead of being my taste, their taste, my taste, their taste, it was, this is what makes rock and roll rock and roll. Do you have a counter theory? See if you have a counter theory. Have they thought about it at all? And they might still not agree with me. They might still pick their bands. But they have a encounter with your relationship to beauty that shows you've processed beauty more than just another tasting vessel that just said, I liked this. I liked, what was the music we were talking about last night? Harry Chapin's Cats in the Cradle. Some people liked it. We won't say who. My son.
Only partially.
Only partially. We're going through a rough patch as a family. But you can have a great discussion and a great disagreement if you're saying, I am planning to come through this disagreement regarding something like beauty, where it's very taste sensitive, very taste oriented, and dominate in it. At least they know it was dominated. They might not agree, but they know that Father wasn't less cool for liking Zeppelin, because he had a theory why he liked Zeppelin, not just, I grew up listening to it. So in all of these things, now you might want to say, I don't agree with how you're recommending we go on. I like the being more social. I got to think about the sex thing, about whether or not your humor and height approach, but I'm really not sure about this, argument of objectivity of beauty. You know these things are coming for your children. Have a view of how you're going to be better at it than they. How am I going to be where they will read that my parents are stronger in society, my parents are stronger in sexuality, my parents are stronger in the arts than any of my friends and anything that's playing on the radio. And then sometimes you'll like something that they bring home to you because they begin to understand what you're saying about rock and roll. And they say, this is pretty good. You ought to listen to this, Father. And I do, and I go, that is really good. That's because you're not just wars between generations. You're saying, no, definitions matter, and that meets the definition. And then they're gratified that something they liked, they presented, and it was enjoyed. So come up with something. It might not be this, but spend up some time thinking about it. You need to get better at life than your children can imagine. That's largely what we're trying to say. And you need to advance, not retreat. You need to be more brave. Don't seek to run away in each of these areas and try to stop your kids from encountering it. They will encounter it eventually. Now, we get to the last bit about letting them go, letting them govern themselves. You've got options that I have here on the side in the top left-hand corner. The only two possible forms of young adult from Christian family are either one, the brainwashed poser, or two, someone susceptible to every doubt and immorality at the state college. Those seem to be the choices at the menu. And you want to say, no, I want to have someone who is respectful and submissive, believing, not profligate, not insubordinate. So something has to break free of, because some things that we do in error get the attention of some kids. Lewis describes it in Lilies That Fester, another essay you must read. And this is his against culture mongers. There are, as in piety, so in culture, states which, if less culpable, are no less disastrous. In the one, we have the goody-goody, the docile youth, who has neither revolted against nor risen above the routine pietisms and respectabilities of his home. His conformity has won the approval of his parents, his influential neighbors, and his own conscience. He does not know that he has missed anything and is content. And that's the prig you don't want to know. It's the person who thinks they've got everything worked out. Everything works, everybody approves him, and everybody, speaks highly of him. And on the other side, you have the doubters, the people that are just throwing it all away. And at that point, you've got, in terms of remedy, if you did it all correctly from the first years till their high school, and then you reacted really well to that, and they admire you, respect you, and you don't have a problem, you can send them off to state college, and they don't pick up every doubt that they offer there. God bless you. If you don't, realize that the grace of God steps in, and conversion itself reaches people that you didn't reach in home management. Because the gospel, and you can operate in their life as if you were an evangelist trying to reach them for the gospel, not a parent who is trying to arrange the circumstances to get them to be more filled with propriety or more or less immoral or something of the sort. If you stand aside from the parenting and say, this is a task for the grace of God, this is a task where the evangelism comes into play. Now, Leslie, do you have a comment here? There's a balloon.
Just know that at that age, when your teenagers are in your home, you're interacting with them, and there could be a lot more opportunities for disagreements, unkind words. Be all the more willing to admit if you wronged your child in something you said to them or did, because that has the greatest effect, that the person above them admitted that.
Yeah, whenever you find out you did something you shouldn't have done or treat them in such a way, make it. My dad came to Doug and me years ago. We were post-Navy, post-college, and he wanted to admit that he had not been a good father to us because he thought he'd been a good father to Gordon. And he raised Gordon a lot differently than he raised Doug and Evan. And Doug and I were looking at each other like, what in the world? We had the best upbringing we can imagine. You know, great relationship with our father, great sense of the scriptures, great sense of, but he was judging himself by a new thing he had learned with Gordon, where it was more, well, you know Gordon. Everybody likes him. You know, Doug and Evan, nobody, well, half the world doesn't like the other half of us. You know? So Dad was concerned, but that kind of thing, we knew we had a father who would examine himself and try to get it right if he thought he had been wrong. We said, you weren't wrong. We wouldn't change it for the world. And I think that reassured him, but we also got to see a father who would make something right if he thought it was wrong. And that's something that's very, very, very valuable. You have this opportunity in you about all of this, because all of this is, we're throwing up a bunch of stuff, and you get to keep the notebooks and whatever thoughts you have on it. But it comes down to the nature of the wisdom you have. And I put this James 3 passage, which is one of my favorites. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good life, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. There you go. It's not being the best in the argument. By your good life, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is one of the things we didn't talk about at all, but people have comparative frameworks about other families and themselves. How their kids are turning out, how my kids are turning out, what's my marriage, why is she cuter than me, things like that. Bitter jealousy, selfish ambition, do not boast and be false to the truth. This wisdom is not as such as comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, devilish. For while jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder in every vile practice. So think about, you got to make your wisdom look like this. You got to make what is wrong in the world primarily selfish ambition and bitter jealousy. Not present, because every vile practice, you don't want the staging ground to be your home. But wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, without uncertainty or insincerity. And the harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So having a lot of this has right target goals, kind of the generic task, then defining those tasks. If I say I need to be wiser to be a good manager of my home, so my kids will grow up and say, what does that wisdom look like biblically? James 3, that's what the wisdom looks like biblically. So these are things I dipstick to make sure I am good fruits and full of mercy and open to reason. And you all know, I've been in enough arguments. I'm always, of course, open to reason if anybody used it. But I need to be open to reason. I need to listen to somebody go, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. And not have my conceit, my ambition, my jealousy stand in the way of hearing what somebody has to say that's better than what I was thinking. Know what you're looking for. Know what God has given for you to get at. I put these things, there's 4 things: the divine, the order, the height, the joy. These are things that ought to be the aroma of the what did the guy at the restaurant say last night about the wine? Brioche. A touch of brioche. It was a Malbec. It was okay. Good Malbec. It wasn't any brioche. But if you were thinking of your home and the aroma of your home and the aroma of the relationships, husband, wife, parents, kids, is the divine, is the order, is everything in its place the way you know it should be placed, or are there ministerings that you have to do to your own life and to your wife's life, your husband's life, to be able to do something for your kids? Because I have these Romans, Corinthians, and Mark passages. Do you not know that God's kindness is meant to lead you to repentance? And 2, for godly grief produces repentance that leads to salvation and brings no regret. And then that's getting you on to say, I'll get things clear, just like my father was trying to get things clear with Doug and me. You got to get things clear with God, get them clear with God. But then you also, sometimes you're not wrong, but somebody else was. And whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. So you have these strong instructions about all the things we're considering. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and I apologize, but you wouldn't have driven from Boise or across town for anything less. Now, this just gives a lot of junk for you to take on. And going back to our initial claims about the seminar, the descent of true image, we have, in all of it, ourselves and in our children, we're playing second role. God and Christ should matter more in your kid's life than you and the missus. And you should be rejoicing that it does. If that does, you've been wonderfully blessed, because they are primarily children of the promise. They are like Isaac, or they're like the Christ, in that they're coming out of this custodial situation. And this is why I have Romans 4. That is why it depends on faith, in order that the promise may rest on grace and be guaranteed to all his descendants. Okay, that's Abraham's descendants. Romans 9 says, this means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, but the children of the promise who are reckoned as descendants. It is far more important that your children show the likeness of their faith parentage. They are children of promise, not just children of the flesh. And you are not the grace. You are just the discipline. You are just the law. You are just the exemplar. You are the exemplar of faith for them. You are the answer people that will, the rabbis that will teach them about what they need to know. But they need to find their way to the promise that is in faith. And it says in Galatians 3, last sentence, and if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise. Just remember that those are things that all feature, target goals, and knowing what is ordinately more important, and don't start finding family rearing, family development, like whether you were Presbyterian and covenantal at all, I don't know, but don't have whatever version of that kind of family centricness be the end goal. It is not. It's not the thing of descent bodily, not children of the flesh who are the children of God. It's the children of the promise. So we've got to get our children to faith. We've got to represent the faith well in order to get there. So is that, it's just the C.S. Lewis long quote. Any noise? Michaela makes noise. Here comes the sound engineer.
I just wondered what your definition of beauty is.
That'd be telling. I try to have this be efficient for all the arts, not music, visual art, etc. Not food. Food is only partially an art, but that art is a signal, an artisanal signal, granted to you that has a sensual signal mentally enjoyed. That your basic thing. So that when your kid does a good illustration of a rhinoceros with a crayon, a good illustration, not just one you're fond of because it's your kid. Good illustration of a rhinoceros, and you say, that's really good. That is a sensual signal, hit your eyes, pleases aspects of your mental order. God gave you certain reactions chemically for certain colors being together, certain lines and certain compositions being displayed, certain tonal differences being chords that you like, chords that makes you sad, things like that. This is all physical armature. But the sensual signal mentally enjoyed. Sex, food, those are sensual signals that you sensually enjoy. You know, you almost destroy those things if you think too much about them. But then the question of beauty, that's the question of art. Now then art becomes better or worse in the degree of craft, because it's artisanship. Artisanship, work has to be involved. C.S. Lewis has that in Good Work and Good Works. As he puts it, a puddle is still a puddle no matter what fine wines or oils have gone into it. So it's not a kind of thing that's done. It's a degree of success in that sensual signal conveying gratification to people mentally. So whether it's a symphony or a famous painting or a not famous painting that is awful, you are measuring its greatness by, you might say, the informality of a beauty response. That a beauty response is when the signal becomes too much for you to mentally process. So if I'm sitting in Beethoven's Ninth, went to see that a number of years ago in Spokane, and full choir, full orchestra. By the time you got to the fourth movement, you're just pushed back in your seat, and if I were a weeping kind of man, I would have wept. But it was amazing, just absolutely amazing. Now, why was it amazing? Because it was famous? No, because the degree of sensual order attacking you was on so many levels. Human voice, instruments, complex symphonic score, and successfully played. So these are all things that add to the arena of the sensual signal that then you're asked to respond to. If someone draws the rhinoceros in a gray crayon, because rhinoceri are gray, and you say to your child, well, that's pretty good. They're gray like that. You got 1 point right, 4 legs, okay, 2 points, and the pointy thing on the end, 3 points. And he's got maybe 4 to 7 achievements sensually coming at you, and not really great, but it's okay. So the sensual signal, when it gets meets the task of the sensual signal, how well you can gratify one signal, and then you combine it with a greater complexity of signaling, and it is successful in the total, Sistine ceiling, whatever it is, that is beauty. And what beauty is, the emotional default when your computer wants to crash because it's trying to process all this satisfaction mentally, and it can't. And so you just have this emotional leap that you take that's sort of like a heat sink that pulls off all the beauty into one place and goes, all the aesthetic gratification into one place and goes, if I talked about it, I'd ruin it. So I think that's my own theory of what beauty is. You got what our art is, and then really successful art reaches a point where you call it beauty. Even a sketch by Rembrandt is not really beautiful. It's famous, or you sell it for a lot, but it's a sketch. It might be quite good, but still not that good. So I think that you have to get to places like Beethoven's Ninth and come up with your own theory. You're an artist, for heaven's sake. Okay, we are now at 10 to 5. Thus endeth the lesson. Let me pray. Just thank God. Dear Lord God, we are very grateful for the one having my voice throughout a day and a half. I got to preach tomorrow, so be there too. We ask that you would bless our time dining together. It'll be gratifying. Thank you for the work that has gone into it and people providing the food. We'd ask that you would bless all of our thoughts as we run down our understanding and our considerations and agreements or disagreements about this, that you'd broaden us. Thank you. In your Son's name, amen. That's fine.